In today's Mental Health Monday, a new study shows a link between cannabis use and mental illness. Licensed therapist Dr. Sheryl Ziegler joins us in studio this morning with more on this study. Very interesting. So talk a little bit about cannabis use disorder, which this study talked about.
Yes, so I think a lot of people don't realize, but this is an actual diagnosis that we use in the DSM-5, which is what we use to diagnose people. So what that means is that someone's cannabis use is excessive. It is getting in the way of their functioning in work, in their personal life. If they stop, they feel withdrawal symptoms, and they also experience cravings. So those are some of the higher level criteria to meet for cannabis use disorder. And what was really interesting about this study that came out is that it said if you had that disorder, that was your diagnosis first. They tracked 6.5 million people. It was a long longitudinal study. And what they found was those people were more likely to experience schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder. So they didn't come in saying, I feel depressed or anxious and I have a cannabis use disorder. That came first, this followed. This is really significant.
Now, this wasn't the first time we've seen a connection made between cannabis and mental health. What was different about this study that stood out to you?
So there were a couple things. The fact that it was a near 30-year study. It was done on all the citizens of Denmark, ages 16 and up. And they were really able to track them, and they were able to get out all of the confounding factors. Because when you do research, there's always like, well, but what about this? And so what they found was, yes, this is a multi-complicated situation because there are genetics, there are environmental situations, there are stress, there's class. So it's not nothing really with mental health is this equals this directly. Right. It's this with genetic predisposition, high levels of stress can equal this or can result in this. So that was, I think, some of the things that really stood out. This is really important for people to understand.
What can we take away from the study?
So I think one of the things, particularly here in Colorado, is that you really can have a cannabis use disorder. You can be addicted, and there's always this controversy, but this is something we've been studying for a very long time. And so you can be addicted. You can reach toxic levels of THC within your system. And this link with, I'm going to make it really simple, with psychosis and with just exacerbating pre-existing mental health conditions. So if you do already have depression, anxiety, a history of bipolar disorder, and you use cannabis excessively, and I'll emphasize excessively, we don't know the safe limit. So whatever excessively means subjectively to each person, we can see this connection with psychosis and really poor mental health outcomes in the long term, and I really want people to understand that.
Okay, so there's a new report from the CDC, and maybe at home you've seen this, that shows more teenagers went to the ER for marijuana use during the pandemic. I want to know what your take on that is.
Well, we saw this happen when marijuana was legalized recreationally here in Colorado about 10 years ago. So we saw the spike. And so that makes sense to me. It was the pandemic, and with edibles, particularly edibles around, there were sort of two camps. It was edibles that were around that children were ingesting. And one of the poor things about this outcome is that it was kids 11 and under, over a 200% increase, right? So those were accidental.
Right.
And then there were also the older teenagers that actually it wasn't necessarily accidental. They were just overusing to the point where they felt physically sick, had mental symptoms to the point where they had to go to the ER. So once again, highlighting you can consume too much THC, which can be toxic to your physical and mental health.
Which is something that we're having to dispel now, because for a while it was saying there's no such thing as too much.
Right.
Yeah. Or that it's not addictive.
It's not
clearly
addictive.
That is not true as well. Dr. Ziegler, thanks for coming in.